Everybody, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're privileged to meet on the Stalo unceded traditional territory of Chilliwack, Palaalt, and Samath. We say this land acknowledgement at the beginning of every meeting as a commitment to reconciliation in our district, but it's just the bare minimum. We also are focused on real meaningful work in the district, and I just want to point out that we are having a district-wide Indigenous Focus Pro D on October 6th that all staff and all trustees will be attending, and DPAC has also been invited to attend, as well as local chiefs and the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, and the superintendent will be giving more information about that in his superintendent's report later on. The board also acknowledges the marginalization that many members of our community have experienced, whether as a result of race, sexual orientation and gender identity, or other personal circumstances. The board is committed to providing a working and learning environment that recognizes the inherent dignity of all persons, that is inclusive of all, and that treats everyone with respect. Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Trustee Swanky, seconded by Trustee Reed. We did have a request from the auditor to move his item, the audit working committee report, the audited financial statements right to the beginning, or no, the report to the beginning, right? Sorry. So 3.2 up to above 2.1. I don't see the auditor in attendance, so I think perhaps with the board's permission, we'll pass the agenda as. Should we do a couple information items before the FESSEL, just so that we don't have to interrupt the FESSEL if he shows up? What can I get recommendation from staff on that? Maybe. Okay, so if we could, with everyone's permission, just move up perhaps 3.1, 3.2 up above the strategic plan FESSEL report, and then if the auditor doesn't show up, we can get a report possibly from from the chair of the audit committee instead of Trustee Swanky.
Consider it moved with that amendment?
Yes. Okay. All those in favor of the suggestion? Thank you. And the agenda. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm just going to move these so I remember that's what we're doing. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please? Trustee Bondar, seconded by Trustee Westerby. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as circulated? Any opposed?
I wasn't here, so.
Okay, so one abstention, motion carries. Okay, so we will, I guess, move up and start talking about trustee remuneration and Secretary Treasurer. Yes.
Yeah, so fortunately we have a board policy on trustee remuneration, and it takes the CPI inflation rate for the preceding year. So we applied that to the remuneration this year, and this item is just a description of that.
Oh,
I didn't.
Sorry, Secretary Treasurer. Yeah, you better can you press it again so people can hear?
That one.
No, not that one. Yep, there we go. That one.
It was the previous one. Yeah, so fortunately we have a policy that describes how trustee remuneration is adjusted every year. And what it does is looks at the prior year's consumer price index, CPI, and applies that to the prior year. So that's what we've done for this year, and you can see the increase presented there. So because it's policy, it's already been approved, and this has actually been, this will be enacted as a retroactive in the next payroll.
Sure, I'm happy to give the audit working committee report. This was the big deal of the year. This was the audit, and this is the place where we ensure that all our ducks are in a row and all of our staff is taking good care of us and looking after our finances. We also had a presentation from Christy. Here we go. It's called a financial integrity toolkit. And basically what she's doing is going around to all the different schools and working with staff at the schools, making sure that everybody's everybody's qualified and able to do the job that they're required to do in regard to the finances, because it's a big deal. There's a lot of money that comes and goes in the schools, and so we need to keep good track of that. And so that's what she's doing there. And then we just saw the financial statement discussion and analysis document, which is a draft. It's not yet formalized. And I would just like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Secretary Treasurer, first audit, and our Assistant Secretary Treasurer, and all staff who worked on it, on a clean audit. I'm telling all right now. It was a clean audit. Everything was well, and the committee had full confidence in the audit that was presented to us. So that is my report.
Okay, so can I just ask Superintendent Savage if we, I know, and the Assistant Superintendent Savage and Assistant Superintendent Jordan, I believe you're here to present the FESSEL report, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so because we had sort of asked the auditor if he could, but he didn't, he's not here that I can see in the audience right now, so I'm just wondering if he was to show up because he's had traffic or whatever, how disruptive would it be if we had to interrupt your report? Would that be okay? Okay, so, okay, good. So then I will get you to start, and just with the caveat that we may have to pause to hear the auditor's words before, if he's pressed for time. Thank you. So we are moving on to 2.1, strategic plan presentation FESSEL report. Never mind, we stalled in time. Okay.
You're up.
So you are, thank you for coming, you're up. Tim, you can introduce yourself at the mic. You need to,
Introduce.
oh yes, oh thank you, Mark.
Okay, if you just. Okay, thank you. We have in attendance our auditor, Tim Holloway from KPMG, just presenting our financials. And just before he speaks to the financials or their process, I'll just note to the trustees that in your package, along with our audited financial statements, is a financial statement discussion and analysis and a reserve summary, which supplements the information in the audited financial statements. These other documents are not audited, but they should tie in nicely to the audited financial statements. They just provide a bit more explanation in detail of the financial activity of the year. And should you have any questions, our contacts in the finance department are on the back. And I will pass it to Tim now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here, Tim. I know you have a packed schedule and are pressed for time, so carry on.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm, I guess, right on time, a little too close. So we have, as Mark alluded to, we've completed our audit of the school district's financial statements. We've met with the audit committee and had a chance to walk through our audit findings. And you have, I'm guessing in the package there, you would have a copy of our draft audit report, which is a clean audit opinion. So subject to the board approving the financial statements this evening, then we would issue our audit opinion, which again I'd emphasize is a clean audit opinion, which is the key outcome you're looking for from the audit.
Are there any highlights that you want to draw trustees' attention to at this time, or is everything in the just as laid out in the packet?
Yeah, no, nothing to draw the attention to for the board. I think we did, as I say, had a chance to meet with the audit committee of the board, and again, I think a very good result in terms of, as I would have touched on, I would say is obviously you look at sort of some of the findings in there in terms of the records that are being kept by the district throughout the year, and you see from those findings that you have, you again have really strong record keeping throughout the year, and so that hopefully is a value for the board's understanding.
Thank you so much, trustees. Do we have any questions for the auditor?
Sorry, not a question, but I just wanted to acknowledge our finance manager, Christy Hodson, who's in attendance tonight. She took the lead on this audit and worked closely with the KPMG team. So I just wanted to extend a thanks to her out of it. So thank you.
I just wanted to say also, it was my first year being on audit committee. I hadn't been on the audit committee for the previous board, and it is quite. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, is our financials super interesting? I found it very interesting, actually, just understanding how audit works, what an audit actually is. It's basically making sure that the people who are doing our finances are reporting everything properly and all the numbers add up. And they do. It's a clean audit. So I just wanted to point out to trustees that audit committee there's only 3 members who have a vote on it from the board, but anyone can go. So if you're actually curious and just want to, it always gets sent out, the invitation to everybody. So if you ever want to go and just observe, you're welcome to do that. So thank you for your time, Tim, and you're welcome to leave since there were no questions for you. You can fly away. That's fine. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are moving back to item 2.1, strategic plan presentation, FESSEL report. Sorry,
That's okay. Just really quickly, just to give some for the public's consideration. So boards normally set the strategic plan, and then they have to report out on student outcomes and put systems in place to monitor achievement across the district. And again, especially with the framework of enhancing reporting order, special focus on equity across the system, which looks at Indigenous students' achievement, children and youth in care, as well as students with exceptional needs and diverse abilities. So we have to submit a report to the minister by the end of September. So this report has, we've actually presented this information prior to as a draft report to the members of the Board of Education. This again is the second time looking at it. It's a requirement. It also allows the public to be able to understand the context of the data within the report. So, and Dr. Kirk Savage, Assistant School Superintendent, with the help of Assistant Superintendent Mrs. Jordan and Mr. Manuel, and myself, thank you. Over to you, Kirk.
Okay, thank you. So there's actually 2 pieces today that in today's board meeting that are connected to FESSEL. This is the presentation, and there's also a report later on, and the actual full FESSEL report is in a link down, where is it? Right here. This will take you to the larger report. So for anybody that wants to follow along with the actual report, that's where that is. The presentation today is on PowerPoint, and it's set up so that the slides from this PowerPoint are connected to pages in the actual FESSEL report. So the 2 pieces are kind of connected. So yes, this is the requirement by the ministry to report out on our student achievement, and it's very much connected to also to our strategic plan. This is for this year, so it was this report is divided into 8 components, and so you'll see as we go through each part. So part 1 is our district context, so just a little bit about who we are and what we're about. 2 is around our strategic plan priorities. So our strat plan has really nicely dovetailed goals with the ministry. We have goals around literacy, numeracy, human and social, and transitions. So these are the areas that are highlighted in this report. Part 3 is talking about some of the district successes from the past year, so here we've highlighted a number of them. So some of them have been ongoing successes that have become part of practice. And here we've highlighted 2 new things that we started last year that we celebrated. One is that produced a new public-facing report called the Strategic Plan Stories, which we presented in June. And that highlights stories from around the district that are connected with our student achievement and strategic plan priorities. The other piece was around our 90-day cycles in our schools and departments, which really helps with keeping track of where we're going as a district and ensuring that we're meeting our goals and outcomes in a more timely fashion. Part 4 is a piece around how are we ensuring that we're communicating and involving with our staff, our community, our partners in our strategic plan and our learning journey. So this part of the report connects to the work that's happened there. a big piece that we're really leaning into in the last couple of years is moving is with our students and the student voice, and moving and the conversation for this year upcoming is not just student voice but student advocacy. So involving our students and ensuring that their voices are making their way to some decision making tables. And I think we had a good example of that in the spring, where we were talking about some of menstrual items in schools and how we utilized authentic student voice to come back to the board table to help with some decisions there. So I think that's something that we're going to continue to really look forward to this year. So part 5 is the piece around our student performance data analysis and interpretation. So again, focused on each of those 4 goal areas: literacy, numeracy, human and social, and transitions. So I just have a few slides here to highlight some of the higher level pieces from the report in each of these areas. So one is on a locally developed measure, or not locally developed, a local measure of around literacy, which is PM benchmarks. So here's where we are at, an overview for our system. You'll see on the right, we've actually included some of what the actual benchmarks are for this reading assessment. And this assessment looks at primarily fluency, decoding, word attack strategies with a little bit of comprehension, but this is what we definitely use this a lot in our primary, elementary, and even early intermediate and into middle school for reading acquisition. So this is an assessment that we use for that. You'll see that our students start out in grade 1 with near 50% around meeting the standard, and as they move through the grades, our students do improve in reading as they move along, and the scale does slide. So it's a little overview of that piece. We have another assessment around literacy. This is we call this ACT, which is the assessment of comprehension and thinking. And whereas the other assessment around reading speaks more to the fluency and decoding piece, the ACT literacy assessment focuses much more on the comprehension and thinking. So less about what you're reading on the page and more about how your brain is making sense of that. How are you able to summarize, find the big idea, make inferences? So it's much more a thinking comprehension assessment. So here, you'll see we have our students are progressing, but this is a much more complex assessment, and there's work to do.
Sorry to interrupt. I just have one question about ACT.
Yep.
Are there any other districts, have any of them taken up our assessment? I'm just curious if we have any other district to compare to. It's hard out of context.
So really good question. Thank you. So ACT is actually it's a locally developed assessment, as you mentioned, and developed by our teachers for our district. And at this point, we're still in the infancy of it. Like I think we're in year 2, maybe 3 of ACT, and so. To this point, we haven't had any other districts pick it up. SNAP, on the other hand, our numeracy, and we have many districts have picked up the numeracy assessment. But we'll get to SNAP shortly.
Lots of questions about it, though.
Lots of questions and interest, but not picked up yet. Yeah. So now we move forward to some provincial measures around literacy. So this is we have highlighting grade 4 FSA, grade 7 FSA, grade 10 literacy, which is a grad assessment requirement, and grade 12. And so here we have in table A, we have data from 21-22, and then on table 4B, we have data for the 22-23 year. You'll see that the grad assessments, we don't have that information yet because the students just wrote just finished writing in the spring. The ministry hasn't released those yet, so that's why we have. We provide the previous year so that this is the most current. And here you'll see we have our school district achievement is in bold, and the provincial achievement is in not bold. Numeracy. This is STAP. This is Student Numeracy Assessment and Practice. This is our locally developed numeracy assessment. And here we have an assessment that looks at both number sense and operations. There's two templates for this, And on the right-hand side, is a bit of a table. I know it's hard to read from the distance, but those are the outcomes that each of the assessments look at each grade. So for grade 2, it's number of concepts to 100. So that's basically any 2-digit number. And on the operations at grade 2, it's addition of 2-digit numbers without regrouping. So those are the outcomes that we look at for grade 2, for instance, on the SNAP. Provincial, this is, again, grade 4 FSA, grade 7 FSA, and then the grade 10 numeracy assessment. Here we show our results. We're a bit behind the province at grade 4 and at grade 7 for all, and our grade 10 numeracy as well. Our Indigenous results are a little better than the province at grade 4, but still there's a gap there that we're concerned about. We have work to do in our numeracy as well. Our next slide, we did so this is a new addition for the report this year, and this is, we actually did some cohort data sets to show, so year to year, how students will progress throughout the system. So for instance, this group here, so June, this grade 4 in June of 2021, then in grade 5, June 2022, and then they're in the same group of students in grade 6 in June of 2023. So it shows, this is a way of showing cohorted data, so we're showing the data in a slightly different way. So there's a bit of a, in this way, we're actually tracking the same group of students as they go through the system. So this is an enhancement to the report this year. And then there's some cohorted data sets here for numeracy as well. Yes?
I had a question. Can you go back one? Sorry. So I see that the grade 1, the blue grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, going, it went from 54 to 72 to 79. I'm just curious, is that like, do you think that's because that would have been kids who were in kindergarten probably during COVID, right? I'm just wondering, like that's a huge gap of from 52 to 54 to 72. It's a much bigger increase than some. Is that just reflective of age, do you think, or do you think that's particular to that particular cohort?
It's pretty common. So when kids start out in grade 1, they're beginning readers, and so a large number of students are just learning, and then there's a lot of growth in grade 1 to grade 2. So there's
the number of benchmarks that students need to move from in grade 1. It's a fairly large number of benchmarks. And so what we do see though is growth between grade 1 and grade 3, right? Lots of growth. So
yeah, good question. So and there's the cohorted data sets for numeracy. Again, these are more fleshed out in the report. This is just a high level overview of that. We then move on to some of our mental health provincial measures. So here we have results from the student learning survey that happens every year, a variety of grades. So this is done at grade 3, 4, grade 7, grade 10, and grade 12. Some of the highlights here are around students feeling welcome. So we improved from 66% student responses feeling welcome to 70% of our students. Feeling safe, 71 to 77. Belonging improved, and having a caring adult stayed about the same. So definitely some interesting information from our student, hearing from our students there. Graduation rates. So here we are with, these are our 5 and 6 year completion rates. We have our school district on 5 year, we have an 83% success rate compared to a province of 87. And then at 6 year, you'll see that our number jumps from 83 to 88, and the province jumps from 87 to 91. You'll see our Indigenous students are on par or better than the province, and our students with diverse abilities are not faring as well. So again, a little area for us to, why is that, and how are we going to improve in those areas. A little graph here showing our 6 year completion rates, and how over time both the district and the province have been improving. we're trying to narrow the gap on the second one between the achievement from all our students and our Indigenous. We want that gap to go away and for us to have real equity there. So still a work in progress. We move on to our areas of need. Literacy, we mentioned we're below the average, provincially we're below the average in reading. And that's definitely certainly a focus for us. Numeracy, 60% of our students are proficient in number, sense, and operations based on our local assessment. That means that 40% are not. So we have work to do there. Provincial measures mirror that, and we have some achievement gaps, just like in literacy with our subgroups of our population. So what are we doing about it? So we have a number of initiatives that we are continuing to support or rolling out new this year. In literacy, we have we actually have new frameworks in all of our goal areas. So the creation of the frameworks last spring, which we're rolling out starting this September, is one of our largest strategies to ensure that we have aligned thinking and approaches throughout our system. Our elementary literacy support is involving about 14 educators visiting all of and working hand in hand with all of our elementary schools is a strategy that we're really excited about. We believe will have some really powerful impact in literacy, and as you can see, we have numeracy strategies, we have human and social development strategies outlined. So we have a lot of pieces for next year, for this year. I think I always want to bring attention to, in the transitions area, we have a brand new piece where we've hired graduation coaches at secondary for our Indigenous students, and we're really like the work that started there, and we're only, how many weeks are we in, Dave? Or 2 weeks in, week and a week, and we're already seeing some really powerful conversations and connections and excitement around that work. So we're really hoping that that strategy takes off and has some legs for us. What are we doing part 8 is around alignment. So one of and I mentioned this just a minute ago, is around the frameworks. So each of the frameworks for each of the goal areas, we're really hoping helps to align our thinking and strategies and make sure that we're all on the same page, paddling in the same direction, pulling in the same direction to achieve the outcome. So we really feel that that framework work will assist.
And it's early days, but we know that it's been rolled out to our elementary literacy collaboration teachers, and the feedback from that teaching staff was extremely positive. It was around, this is the tool that we can utilize and take in because it provides practical examples and practical strategies that teachers can use in their classrooms to help students learn how to read. So I know it's just a little dipstick check, but 2 weeks in, and that's the feedback. It's pretty positive.
Well, I think today we heard from our numeracy support teachers at Leary.
Yeah.
They had a great day at Leary, and the numeracy framework, very well received. A lot of excitement. So we're hoping that these strategies and alignment approaches really help with improving life chances for our students moving forward. And then just the appendices, and that's the presentation.
Thank you so much for that thorough presentation. Trustees, do you have any questions? Oh, you press your button. Trustee Moss.
Thank you. I know that was not an easy report to give. These are not the results that anybody wants to see. So I guess we can look forward next year to seeing some of the fruits of the labor of these 14 staff people that are going around to the schools to pick up the pieces of these kids who are struggling to read, and do math. I guess in relation to graduation, I guess what concerns me is so when you look at the grade 7 results that are sobering, you wonder how they graduated, or do we have numbers on, do we lose kids after grade 7 who are not making it, and so the ones that graduate, those numbers are not included? Or how does that work?
So I think that when you look at the 5-year graduation rates, we had 83% of our students. So that cohort goes through from grade 7, it's that same grade 8 on. So it may not capture the grade 7s, but it captures the grade 8s. So if we have 83% graduating in 5 years, that means that 17% did not. Now we catch another 5% in the 6th year. So we have 12% of students, not graduating with a dogwood. So, yeah.
Trustees? Trustee Bondar.
Thanks. Great, thank you for the FESSEL report. It's always really interesting to have a look at the snapshot of the year, but I love how this year we had those cohorted data sets. I love how we can actually track how well a particular cohort is doing through the years. I noticed a couple of things, and I have a couple of questions about the ACT. So the ACT being our local assessment for reading comprehension. I noticed it doesn't go out to students younger than 3rd grade. Is it just because it is developed for sort of older students, things that they'll know about? And I'm just sort of wondering about thinking and ideas for younger students.
That's a really good question. I think it was our thinking was we didn't want to overload the grade 2 teachers with yet more assessments. Like the real piece, if kids are struggling to learn how to read fluently, by the end of by grade 2, we're working really hard on that. And by putting in another district assessment, I think we just felt that it was maybe too much. Yeah. And but grade 2 students could definitely do the same activities and learn the same way. It's just we didn't feel it was necessary to collect that information because we're really looking at PM benchmark data as the key piece of that age group.
And there's a variety of other primary assessments that happen K through grade 2 that our primary teachers are focused on during that time. But we do know that there are grade 2 teachers out in the system. They're feeling confident and wanting to be able to share the ACT with their classes as well. So, yeah.
They do.
Trustee Wester.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a really important presentation, and the data here is really important for myself to know where we're at, and for obviously all the trustees and for the public. So I really appreciate the way you presented it, and it's very easy to understand where we're at. And I recognize that we do have some shortfalls, but it's really important for me to hear you say that you know that we have these shortfalls and that we're doing something to fix it. I think I'd be far more alarmed if you didn't raise that. And to know that we have a measurable plan to improve these gaps already, and it's been enacted, especially with the not new curriculum, and how we need to support our teachers and students to adapt to that framework. It's just really great to hear that you have a plan. So thank you.
Trustee Swanky.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'll echo the comment to my colleague and my appreciation for the report, including some of the updated data sets and some of the depth that they've provided in presenting the report today. I echo and am sensitive to the fact that there are student learning results that aren't where we wanted them to be, but I also want to draw attention to the fact that when you look at our student learning surveys, when you look at our EDI, MDI, YDI data, we have seen continued improvement. And so I agree there's investments that I hope pay dividends, but I also want to acknowledge good work that has happened that is reflected in the data presented, and that I hope that ends up becoming the foundation for academic success this year and going forward. So I don't want anyone to think that there aren't things worth acknowledging, celebrating, and good work being done in the district, and it is reflected in this report as well. So thank you.
Trustee Reed.
Yeah, always appreciative of the hard work you do to make the data accessible. I just wanted to say how appreciative I am of the ways that we highlight things closer to the human and social development portion, safety, welcome, feeling welcome, belonging, because they are key, like very, very, very key points to the other pieces of learning. If a child doesn't feel safe, if they don't feel welcome, they can't access any of those other things. And I'm really glad that we have that in there. And I appreciate the way that you guys tell that story.
I just want to ask one question first, and then I will go to you, Trustee Bonder. I actually had a question related to EDI and MDI as well. I think it's a really good assessment because it does give us a sense of like where kids are at emotionally and how safe they're feeling at home, in the community, at school. I'm just wondering, do we have a way, like I know lots of districts do those assessments. Have we looked at like the percentage of kids who score high on that, and then how those districts do on the FSAs, for example? Like, do we have a way to compare that? Because obviously learning doesn't happen in a vacuum, and one of the criticisms of the FSAs and the way it's been manipulated by certain organizations is that it doesn't take into account the demographics of the schools or the districts that are taking part. And so I'm just curious about that, and I'm also curious to see as our results for that go up, because we seem to be doing a better job, if that's going to have an impact on things like the FSA. So I'm just curious if there's a way to find maybe a district that has virtually the same results as us on the EDI or MDI, and then how they're doing. I'd be curious about that.
So, the point is well taken that students who are supported, who are well fed, who have lots of rest, who are having a lot of self-efficacy, they do better in school, and so and would perform better on FSA type of assessment. So certainly there is a correlation between that. And so if our students are feeling more welcome and better, then they will do better. We have not actually looked at a district that has similar results, but that is there's lots of research about that.
Yes.
Yes.
To be clear, I wasn't asking you to submit a huge report on that. I was just curious if you'd ever looked at it. I am curious about it. I guess look it up myself. Probably it's publicly available info. Trustee Bonner.
Thank you. I have another question. In the greater conversation about improving reading comprehension scores or skills across the board, you mentioned inner city middle literacy support. Could you just explain a little bit about what that looks like? Thank you.
We know that we have students at middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, who are struggling with reading. If you go back, there's groups of students from grades 3 and 4 that maybe aren't meeting expectations, and they go through the system, and they're still struggling in middle school. And so we have a higher percentage of students in our inner city middle schools. Connected to Trustee Riechelt's earlier comment about, so we actually have some supports at both 80 Rundle and CMS, where we have targeted staffing that are working with students in small groups or one-on-one to help those students become better readers. And so that started out last year at 80 Rundle, and this year we've added some supports in at CMS as well. So we're hoping that is, well, we know that it's going to help, and we're feeling good about that.
And those supports are in the form of EAs or extra teachers for that purpose?
Great question. So it's a form of teachers. So teachers providing direct support to students, as well as providing some training to our EAs, and as well as as classroom teachers and other support teachers. So, yeah.
Those teachers. The teachers have some specialty training with respect to reading instruction. So that's also significant.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Not just random stuff. Okay. Trustee Moss.
Thanks. So on that note, I just want to go back in time because I'm old and I've been on this board for so long. But I remember when the EDI first started, and we had an anomaly, and that was Rosedale Elementary School, which had scored as a lower socioeconomic group in the EDI, because that's what that's all about. They scored quite low in that, but their results in their reading and their math were really good. And the reason for that was because they switched the program at that school and they used a direct instruction program there. And we watched their results do this consistently. So, you know, the whole thing with the EDI and the MDI kind of concludes that, oh, well, kids from lower socioeconomic areas, they don't do as well as the other kids. It's like, but they can. And a team is only as strong as its worst player. So that's what we strive for. So, and I know you do. And I know that's your goal. So I thank you for that.
All right, trustees, I don't see any more questions, so thank you so much, Assistant Superintendents, for that thorough presentation. And we are going to move on. Sorry, I just have to get reoriented because we moved things around. So we're on to 3.3, which is BCSTA report. Trustee Reed?
So there hasn't been a lot over the summer season, but there are a couple things to make note of. So the motion deadline for Provincial Council is September 20th. So if there's something along those lines, we need to look forward to that and work together if we want to position something, because Provincial Council is on October 20th and 21st. I will be attending that. Academy is November 23rd to 25th. It's already in our calendars, but should make note of that. If you go through your BCSTA emails, there's a survey for systemic racism that they would like us all to fill out by October 15th, but they would like us to push it out to social media at large. They want as many people in British Columbia as possible to fill this survey out. So it takes about 15 minutes. They have suggested that we just put it out to as many people as possible so that they get data.
Trustee Reed, can I just clarify, is that the BC demographic survey that's being talked about in general, or is this one specific to education?
It says BC demographic survey, yeah. So
Okay,
it's
thank
linked
you.
in one of the BC.
Yeah.
Perfect. I have it open so I can answer.
Yeah, that's a government survey going out across the province, and I guess because we are connected to people, they want us to promote it. Thank you.
Yeah, so they would like us to take note of that survey, as we do have a platform to kind of highlight it and send it out. So, and then just the one other thing to take note of is that the hub is changing over to the portal, and there are sort of new options, new information options over there. Not everything is moved over yet, but it is notable. And I think that's everything that I have for this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Trustee Reed about the BCSTA report? Thank you for your report, Trustee Reed. All right, trustee written reports are in the package. Now we're moving on to 3.5, Superintendent's update.
Thank you, Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. First of all, starting today, I'll be doing a bit of an update. Generally, I provide all the trustees a weekly update of information from the district and or information from the ministry. And so part of today's presentation, so first of all, we'll be having this at every public meeting. And even though it's an oral report, you will actually see probably a 2-page PDF document attached to our public website next to the meeting minutes for this particular. So that sort of accounts for the information that I'm going to be presenting. I've just got 4 slides, except that the slides are not going to have information because I will be talking to it. The purpose of the presentation is to be able to go back and connect the work we do back to a strategic plan. Just like Assistant School Superintendent Dr. Kirk Savage talked about the work that we do. Everything needs to be aligned and we need to be intentional. So the updates at every public meeting, they'll be back on our public website after the meeting. And then at some times, there'll be members from my team that'll present with me because it's also connected to their work and part of their portfolios. And then last but not least is that this information may not be new for trustees, but again, questions are great because that allows the public to be able to understand the work that we do. So, perfect, thank you. So let's just go to the first slide, Dr. Savage, thank you. So the first important piece, and I know that Bocha mentioned this very briefly, for the very first time in our school district, the last time in our district we actually had a collective common professional day was back in 2008. I still recall that day very clearly. And so it's been a long time coming. This has been lots of work, part of our organization. This is super important. This is connect back to our district strategic plan. And again, the whole notion around human and social development. We talked about truth and reconciliation. So on October 6th, district-wide professional day for all of our staff and our leaders and our trustees and our partners. We've got 5 partner groups. We are also going to be having basically district parent advisory council members attend. this event, along with Indigenous Advisory Committee members also, as well as we have our employees, Chilliwack Teachers Association, QP staff members, and our principals and vice principals that are part of the association. So this is a significant day for our district. This is our work of advancing on our path towards truth and reconciliation. The day's agenda is going to feature a message. So part of the agenda is we're going to have a message from the Honorable Stephen Point, former Lieutenant Governor of BC and the current Chancellor of the University of British Columbia. It'll also include keynote addresses from Len Pierre and Dr. Keith Carlson. And Len Pierre basically he runs an Indigenous Leadership, Innovation and Transformation Consulting Group. We've had a chance to actually hear him speak. I think most of the trustees too have had a chance to actually hear him speak. And Dr. Keith Carlson works at the same institution. Dr. Banda works at Professor of History at the University of Fraser Valley. Dr. Keith Carlson is a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Indigenous and Community Engaged History. On top of that, we're also going to be having a panel on that day of local Indigenous leaders, Chief Derek Epp from the Chiacton Band, Chief Mark Point from Skalkale, Chief Laura Muscle from Squirrel First Nations, and Chief Dave Jimmy from Squirrel First Nations be part of a panel. And the aim is for us to be able to deepen our understanding and to be able to commemorating of the historical truths conveyed by First Nations, Métis, and Inuit knowledge keepers. So a real day for all of our staff to come together. This is the place where we can actually be super vulnerable as a staff as a whole in one place to be able to share our knowledge, to be able to ask questions, and also acknowledge the harm as a district collective team of the harm inflicted on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples as an organization. And then our commitment towards, committed to the acts of reconciliation, decolonization, and building relationships in our greater community, and recognizing our collective role for leading for equity. And this connects back to the FESSEL report and our work towards a graduation rates and making sure that we erase the disparity between Indigenous students graduating and all of our students. So that work's ongoing, and this is a strong step towards that. And I think what's really powerful is that I think it's a chance for the district staff to come together and be vulnerable as an organization. And that's not easy, but I think this is a strong point towards a journey towards reconciliation. So that's the first update. The second one is summer school, and generally these reports are part of the presentation, but I would rather have this with part of my presentation by itself. So every year we offer summer school. This last year was no different. Robust summer school learning program, multiple sites around Chilliwack Senior Secondary. You might hear about the Sardis Senior Secondary Farm at Richardson Road, Fairfield Island Park, Blue Heron Nature Reserves, Chiacton, Sardis Park, and Squaw First Nations. A large number. So we have 3 programs with elementary and then middle. They both ran from July 4th to July 14th. And then we have secondary that ran from July 4th to July 27th. Elementary students had a chance to experience active learning courses such as Be Fit with Lit and Math on the Move and Outdoor Adventures. They also got to try out agriculture. That's a common theme among all 3 levels. And we had a total of 22 students enrolled in the elementary agriculture program, grades 3 to 5. Middle, similar notion. They had band, ADSD, fine arts, and then they had the sustainable vegetable production and more, which is sort of the agriculture program. They had total of 22 students enrolled in the middle school agriculture program. And then secondary was somewhat different. The purpose of secondary summer school is to help students improve a failing mark. It's like credit recovery before transitioning to the upcoming school year, or to gain additional credits as they go through the journey, right? So full credit courses towards graduation. Students attended 4 hours per day for 4 weeks. Out of the 74 students who took secondary courses, 64 completed successfully. So in grade 9, recovery courses were English, humanities, math, and science. And the full credit courses that were offered were social studies 10 and foundations of math and pre-calculus 10, connected back to our FESSEL framework presentation by itself. A total of 77 students took part in the agriculture program, which again is a success. There's a connection in all 3 areas. Basically be connected with the environment and really be engaged. So that was, and so real quick numbers. Total number of students, 783, grades 1, 2 through 12. Total courses were 42. This year, for the very first time, we had a bus that provides support from students from Sardis and GWG to Chilliwack Senior Secondary. So we had approximately 56 students from Sardis and 87 from GWG take part in the opportunity. 49 staff members, 16 EAs in administration that manage the program, giving up the time and busing. Just to let people know, summer school is cost neutral for us. We get some funding, but it's cost neutral. And the notion is to provide support to students during the summer. And again, there'll be a mini report that'll be up on our public website. The third one, thank you, Dr. Savage, is web and link crew. And again, I talked about the connection back to our strategic plan. This is around transitions. As you know, the level of anxiety students feel when they first go to middle school or to secondary school, especially high school, could be a scary place for some of the students. And so how do we enhance connections for people to feel super comfortable? There are two programs. One is web, which is a middle school program where everyone belongs, and the Link Crew program is basically a secondary transition program. And there are staff members, 1 or 2 teaching staff members who have committed to their personal training, as well as training of the web and Link Crew leaders at each of our schools. 1,100 grade 6s and 1,200 grade 9s were welcomed the latter part of August. And again, the connection is to be able to make sure they can successfully transition and have somebody there to support them. Again, Link Crew is a secondary transition structure program, welcomes grade 9s to high schools. And the foundation of the structure is that students can help students really succeed and manage the complexities of a high school life by itself. Link Crew leaders are trained senior students who act as mentors and student leaders to guide grade 9 students as they discover what it takes to transition and to really manage high school life and manage how they can become successful. And web, where everyone belongs, it's that program that welcomes grade 6 students. They feel comfortable again at their middle school experiences. The programs train mentors from grade 8 classes to be web leaders in their school. And again, if you go back to the link, you'll find some pictures there of students that go through it. It happens yearly. This connects back to our strategic goal of transitions, and I think goes back to EDI, MDI, the maturity survey, the YDI. It's around connections. People feeling super comfortable being able to be connected to one or more adults in the school as well as other students for them to feel successful. That leads to engaging in literacy and numeracy. So the next one is, thank you, Kirk, the last one. And this again is enrollment. And what I'm going to do is, actually, Kirk, I think, thank you. I forgot I had the slides there. So every year, as I mentioned to you, we first have to come up with looking at all of our assumptions in the month of February. This again is never easy. You never want to over-project. You're looking at the birth rates based on, we have a piece of software, as well as in-migration, out-migration, provincial in-migration, lots of factors, as well as the housing stats from the city of Chilliwack. We are meeting with the city again to connect with around some of the new developments. So taking all those things into consideration, I wanted to have you, if you look at the top part of the slide, it just talks about our growth the last many years. I track all of the growth to see, and again, since I think 2015, we have been growing. It's been a couple of slow years, but generally. And so just really quickly looking at it, so our change right now, September, looking at what it goes through, our change is 3.15%. When you're looking at the growth, is that 263 analysis, 2023. 2022 to 2023, the change is 3.15%. And so there is a growth in our system. Generally, what's happened is that approximately the growth is basically at elementary and also at secondary schools. Generally, to let you know, students normally come in, we see a huge bump at the end of August, lots of registrations, we get super excited. People have a hard time finding a place to reside in Chilliwack. Rents are pretty expensive. In the past many years, some of those families then move on to areas such as Kamloops. So what's really crucial is we do our counts really clearly and then figure out who's going to be in our system. Can you go to the next slide, Kirk? So this is what it actually looks like. So the very top number, 14,800, those are students in all of our schools except continuing education, which is for adults, such as Ford Mountain as well as the SARDIS program, and students at Quaker Secondary. That's funded, but they're not counted as a K-12 headcount regularly. That was 14,800.7. You may wonder why the 0.7, because high school students, grades 10 to 12, take additional classes beyond the 8th course. So you have compilations of those courses. So 14,800 is what we actually send to the ministry. What we have in the system is, that's the head count, 14,520. This was as of September 11th, which is yesterday. That's the number of kids head count. So then the next line talks about flex courses. So if you take the number of students in our high schools, grades 10, 11, and 12, we got approximately 3,500 students. They all will take one extra course and beyond. That's the 9th course. So that line that calls flex work experience, that's additional FTE, full-time equivalency that we need to add to the enrollment. That is just being materialized between now and the end of September. That's when all of the timetables will become complete. And that's why we wait till the end of September to complete actual enrollment figures that are sent to the Ministry of Education and Childcare by, I think, it's October 6th.
Just before you go off of this slide, can I just clarify? The budgeted FTE sent to the ministry was higher than our actual total, but when you look at the bottom, our actual enrollment is higher than our. Sorry, I'm getting confused between those two parts. If you could just clarify that.
That is correct. So the very first top line is 14,800. That's what we put towards the ministry for our funding, excluding Quaker Secondary. That's an alternative learning environment, right? Because that's, then on top of that, right now what we have, again, K-12, these are all of our regular schools, excluding Quaker Secondary, and continuing education is 14,520. So that's just head count, right? Now to that, we're going to add all the extra classes that are going to be scheduled for the high school students, grades 10, 11, and 12, because generally they can take more courses than 8 courses that they normally have in a schedule.
So just to clarify, so our actual estimate was 14,800, and our actual total is 15,086. So even though it looks like we had less than we were expecting, we actually have more than 100 more than we were expecting. Is that correct?
So overall, so you're looking at the bottom part of it right now, the 15,086. That number will include also, it includes alternate and CE now, overall collectively. So what we have on our budget of a number would be 14,983.7. As of today, yesterday, we got an extra 100, which is quite conservative overall for all of the students in our system.
So we can't submit when we it says submitted to the ministry somewhere, doesn't it? Yeah. So like
Budgeted.
Budgeted. So not budgeted for but what we saw the budget was this amount. But we always budget for just excluding all, like that's what we budget for, even though we know we're going to add all this other stuff, the flex, and we're going to add everything. We budget for the just straight enrollment. Is that sort of the deal?
No, no, we budget for all of it,
Okay.
but it's the way it's presented. I want to make sure that there's a difference between alternate and CE and students in bricks and mortar schools of all of the high schools, elementary schools, and middle schools. What really matters is the number on the bottom.
Okay.
As of today, we've got 100 FTE. We have 100 FTE greater than what we actually provided to the ministry and projected.
Okay.
Can I pose a
Yes.
clarif-
Yes.
So this is just another way of looking at it. There's actually 2 separate analyses going on that page. Is that right, Superintendent?
Yes.
So the top analysis does not include continuing ed. They're not K-12 or alternate, which may or may not be K-12. Often it is, and that's we told the ministry that would be 14,800. We have counted 14,500 students, but because we believe that 400 additional FTE will be given to us, the total that we believe that we currently have is 14,920. right? I'm adding those two numbers. And that's why we're 120 out. Makes sense? And then the second half is a different analysis that now includes continuing ed and alt.
Okay, yeah, I guess it was just the part where it says budgeted that was confusing me, because I'm like, didn't we budget everything? But regardless, basically, we're above budget for enrollment. We have more than we expected.
That's correct. That is, the bottom line for trustees would be is, and I've got two pieces running, is that we've got 100 FTE greater than what has been used to drive our budget. That was based on our projections. That's everybody in our system and all the courses that did. The 3 lines would include all of in the system. And this number will change between now and September 30th.
Thank you so much. Sorry about the interruption. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding whether we were in a problem or a good thing. Trustee Moss.
So does that also include the students that are registered through the school district that homeschool?
It is. So that number doesn't include them right now because the fact that they'll be formalized by the end of the month.
So September 30th is when we'll know the exact numbers. Okay, thank you.
After interruption.
That's it. Thank you. Questions?
Sorry, Trustee Swank. I wanted to get it before I went off the slide. I could have waited 1 second. Sorry, Trustee Swank.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, if I may. First, just related to the transition supports through web and link. I'm looking for the approximate proportion. Is it 25% of transitioning students, 75%? Like, what is the approximate proportion of students that participate in that early intake and support?
They all do.
They
All grades, all grade 6s,
Okay, like
grade 9. Well, you know, within reason, right? Like they have to be. It's over the summer, right? So, but for the schools plan for all of their 6s and all their 9s. Yeah.
Secondarily, I know it's very common we get these headcount updates early in the month, and they go up between now and the 30th. I'm wondering at this point, has there been any consideration of moving portables to address the fact that it looks like enrollment is above what we may have anticipated? And yeah, there's just the logistical piece there.
Thank you. At this point, no, we haven't looked at that. One of the things we have been doing is we're moving portables. As you'll see, we're moving portables to areas and adding portables. So we had to move the portables off of the GWG site. That was part of our commitment to the ministry. There is still 2 left that we explained to the ministry. One is a football portable, one is has another. So we have 2 portables there that have continuing activities. The balance needed to be removed. So at a site at Rosedale, which we know has growth and we are seeing future growth, we actually have added more portables there than must be required this year. So we're staging for future growth where we see it. So at this point, no, we're not planning to move any more portables this year.
Yeah, I have a student who's going through the web program right now, and I have to tell you that it made the difference between her going and not going some days. So, like, high anxiety, it's just seeing it and just seeing her peers speak about it and speak about the supports and sorry, getting emotional. It's a really tough time of year for parents, and middle school is like really hard when you have a very nervous kid. So that is amazing. I was just wondering, do you guys do any sort of do we have data on the emotional impact? Like before, like do they ask them questions at the beginning and the end, like how they feel, if they feel more comfortable, or the ways that it's helped them? Sorry, I guess I could probably ask my child if she was asked these questions.
Thanks for that, Trustee Reed. I know we did send out a bit of a survey this year, just looking for some quotes for some web leaders and link crew leaders, and also from some students who were participants in the program. And so we did get some back. I think there's
Rohan sent out a one-pager. So in that one-pager, there's documented of that. But we also know that it's not just the one day that these students experience this, right? It's a year long where students connect with their web leader and also their link crew leader, and have conversations about things that they might be struggling with, ways that they, strategies that they can use throughout the year. So I think that mentoring connection through the year is really helpful for students. So I think perhaps that's something that we could take back and provide some measurables at the end of the year this year.
Sorry. Not to add to like the data pile that you have, I just I know from the perspective of telling the success stories on the ground that it seems like a huge success story, and even just measuring the confidence of the child through the year as they connect with that mentor. If the data does ever become available, it would be very interesting. Thank you.
Saw a green flash.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
me.
it was Trustee Bonder.
I had a couple of things that I wanted to come back to very briefly. The October 6th day, I just want to mention how incredibly important that is, and that SC33 is really setting the bar for what reconciliation could look like in a school district. And I'm really proud of our district for putting this day on. And I know that the rest of Canada, not just the rest of British Columbia, is actually watching districts like ours that are leading the charge in terms of our efforts towards reconciliation. So thank you. Web leaders. I had two awesome program. That peer-to-peer component, I think, and especially I wonder if there's maybe even a function there for reading comprehension at some point. But that is such a great, successful program. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, everybody. I think that looks like it's the end of that section. We will do. Oh, I just want to say one thing before we move on. I just want all trustees to feel confident to be a bit vulnerable, and if you have feelings, that is totally fine. We bring our feelings to the table, and I think it makes us better trustees to have a connection. So don't ever apologize for that. I just want to put that out there. No apologies necessary to anybody who's got a personal connection to a topic. Anyways, we'll do public participation, and then in understanding that people need breaks, we'll do a break after public participation. So this is the public participation period. It's comments or questions concerning the agenda. It will be 15 minutes long, and please don't mention anyone by name, ideally. And that we've basically gone over this lots of times. There's 2 minutes to speak. Anyone who wishes to do so can come to the mic. Identify yourself when you get to the mic.
Hey, I'm Katie Bartel. I'm chair of DPAC. First of all, I want to thank the district for welcoming us to the October 6th day. It feels like actually a really big step for DPAC to be included in that this year, and I hope to see those kinds of things continuing. So thank you. Just around the FESSEL, and forgive me if you said this, I probably know the answer, but I forget. Is the FESSEL based on dogwood and evergreens, or just dogwood path?
Just dogwood.
Okay, so then I'm assuming the percentage for the kids with disabilities that was just adapted criteria and stuff, right? So how do you track the children with disabilities and their success? I wrote a question down and it's not worded well, but how do you assess the academic success for kids with disabilities in an inclusive and accessible way if you're not using standardized testing? How are you collecting that data? Are you collecting that data? What does that look like?
That is a very complex question for what we can say is that the students we have very few students on Evergreen. When we looked at the data, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was very, very tiny.
Right.
So
No.
I feel like it was like single digit almost. 5 or it was like 9. It was a small number. I don't have it on top of my head, but it was a small number of Evergreen. Yeah. So we're really our students are aspiring to dogwood or adult dogwood.
And as far as those system checks, Katie, right, we would be looking at those provincial assessments. So literacy 10, numeracy 10, the literacy 12, right? So because I think you asked the question around how are we tracking those students. So all of our students are writing. Are those?
Yeah, we have very few on Evergreens. Yeah. If the few of the students that we have on Evergreens is very much through their individual education plans, yeah. Right? And the goals and how we're achieving that. Well, it's just, that's a larger presentation, I think. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, not seeing anybody else at the mic. We are going to adjourn for, in order to give everyone time, 10 minutes. Trustee Bondar, you can, I'm assuming we're putting up your hand to make the motion.
I was, thank you. Oops, sorry. Let me push your button. Thank you. I will move that the Board of Education approve the framework for enhancing student learning report to be submitted to the ministry by September 30th, 2023.
Do we have a seconder? Trustee West. Trustee Bondar, would you like to speak to your motion?
I do feel like we've spoken at length about the FESSEL report. It was excellent. I'm, very happy about it.
Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Trustee Swain.
Sure, thank you, Chair. The question before the board at this point is, first I'll speak in favor of it, Chair. The question before the board at this point is not necessarily our satisfaction or their lack thereof with the results, but really the integrity of the data, the articulation of the board's strategic plan is reflected in the report, and its alignment with the framework for enhancing student learning reporting order. To that point, I think this is another year staff have done an exceptional job of presenting that data. So my appreciation to them for the work, and again, I'll speak in favor of it.
Thank you, Trustee Swanky. I appreciate you pointing out for trustees that what we are basically voting on is that this FESSEL is an accurate representation of the data in the district. So, not seeing any other comments, all those in favor that the Board of Education approve the framework for enhancing student learning report to be submitted to the ministry by September 30th, 2023. That's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we are moving on to 5.3, Annual 5-Year Capital Plan 2024-2025, Revised Minor Capital Plan for BUS. Well, that's a big title for that agenda item. Secretary Treasurer.
In June, we brought you a capital request for submissions that needed to be made by the 30th of June. There is one portion that can be made by the 30th of September. And while you approve the bulk of that in June, we're adding a little bit to it, and that is 2 buses. So if you scroll a little further, you'll see the actual submission now includes $317,000 for buses. So the 3 items above that you have actually already approved. So tonight we're asking you to approve a request to the ministry for that additional funding to buy some, I think it's like 2 or 3 buses, 2 buses.
Yeah.
Specifically?
Correct. It's for 2 buses. One is a replacement. So buses are looked at time that they've been in service and also mileage, and they have to meet those criteria. And the other is we're seeing quite an increase in our special needs busing, and this is another bus to support special needs. And from an earlier conversation, both of these buses have 2 wheelchair accessible parts to them.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify for the benefit of all, this is a request from the ministry for funding, not extra money we're just spending out of our regular budget, correct?
Correct. The ministry will tell us probably sometime around April, May, whether or not we're successful. So it's not really a purchase until the 24-25 year if we get approval.
Thank you, Trustee Sarvar. Oh, Trustee Bondar. Oh, Trustee Swanky, I did see you, so I'll call you after Trustee Bondar.
It's just a question, if I may.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually germane to the discussion about buses, but there is a change in the minor capital project from what was presented in June in the funding for playgrounds. And I just wondered, is that something we're approving today, or is that something the June meeting presented it at $165,000 per project, and what's been presented today is $195,000 per project. And I was just looking for clarity on if that's part of the considerations before us.
I can speak to the ministry is supplying, if approved, $195 per playground. So this would just be an update to correct to the amount the ministry will fund if approved.
Just further clarity then, is that an increase from the funding that was available last year, or are they maybe providing some of the ground prep that I know we often pay for in order to pay for the equipment? I hope.
Unfortunately, no, it is the same as last year. So 195 was the same as last year. I think 2 years ago was 165.
Trustee Bondar.
every time we talk about new buses, the first thing that comes to my mind is, can they be electric? And I know they can't yet because I've asked you this before, but where do we sit in terms of the possibility for a move to electric vehicles in the future?
So currently, a lot of research is being done. We've just completed a study. So one of the things that we need to look at is the infrastructure to charge the buses. So we work with several different consultants, electrical engineering consultants, and we're working with the ministry as well. So we've just completed an audit of our facility and what would be required. We were looking at a long-term plan of 30 electric buses. Our fleet is 60. We will, it's going to be a staged approach. So we do have all of that documentation. It has been submitted. And right now the ministry is trying to get a good understanding of what districts are looking for in funding. What is this going to cost in total? So we have completed that submission for infrastructure upgrades. And we're continually monitoring. There are some districts that have gone to electric buses, a few electric buses. And with anything new, there's hiccups in the system, right? So we're seeing those things happen. We're monitoring and we're also watching the costs of the busing. Any new product starts out higher, generally starts to dip in cost. We're also watching to see what ministry is supporting for dollars and other players, BC Hydro, those types of things are other players. So in my time, I think there's value in monitoring this and getting all of our resources ready before we strike, before we launch, move forward. And just to keep in mind, the electric bus is almost twice the cost, and it would be a larger percentage for us to cover going to electric. So there's some significant costs, and once we have a good understanding, the infrastructure costs, the bus costs, then that's something we would bring back to you.
Trustee Wester.
Yes, thank you. Actually, maybe the chair can answer this, if not, maybe to the staff. I seem to recall us having approved previously some buses that were provided by the 2023 budget through the province. Is this additional to that?
Secretary Trustee.
Yeah, good question. I think what you might be remembering is one of two things. One, when the province approved our last year's submission, right? Probably in April, May, and then we come here and we say, board, now they've approved it, can we spend it? You say, yes. And the other thing was the budget approval, where we talked about the fact that we needed to make an additional local contribution for those buses that were going to cost more for us than we'd anticipated. I think it was like $50,000 or $60,000 more per bus than we were getting from the ministry.
I'm not. Oh, sorry, trustees. I was going to say, can someone make the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I would move that the Board of Education of School District 33 Chilliwack, in accordance with provisions under Section 142.4 of the School Act, approve the proposed revised minor capital programs in the 5-year capital plan for 2024-25, as provided in the 5-year capital plan summary outlined in the attached document.
This is provided.
Seconded by Trustee Westerby.
The Chair could not read that again before we vote.
Trustee Swanky, do you wish to speak to the motion that you've just...
I believe the background articulates well the rationale, and my appreciation to staff for the work.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of passing the minor capital plan revision as presented? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, trustees. Okay. On to 5.4, Bylaw 5, Board Meeting Procedures Revised.
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer.
This one's me as well, and the following one is as well. So making a couple of adjustments to the bylaw to reflect and ease some practices. The first one is timeline, we adjusted the timeline for submission by board members of items for future board meetings. So you'll see that referenced. We moved it from, I think, 1 week to 11 days. You'll see that referenced twice in the amendment. The second thing we did was clean up the conflict of interest language. It was mentioned multiple times. It was also not completely aligned with the law, and we do have another policy on it that's specifically on it. So we just made the references to that so that in future we don't have to change it in multiple places. And then the last thing was that we have added an item to our board meeting agenda, and you'll see that at I can't scroll down there. There we go. 4.5.10, which is the superintendent update. So that's everything that we've changed on that. We're proposing to change on that.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. I did just want to point out that the superintendent's update was partly in response to a notice of motion from Trustee Moss, which we did discuss with her that fulfilled her request, which is why that is not a separate motion on the agenda. I just did want to acknowledge Trustee Moss's work in that matter. So, trustees, are there any questions before we move on? Okay, so I'm not sure if all trustees have been here for a bylaw change before, so I do need to explain that a bylaw is different from a regular policy and that it needs 3 readings. Now, as a board, we can make a motion today to do all 3 readings in one meeting. That motion has to pass unanimously in order to do that. If anyone opposes the passing of all 3 readings in one meeting, then we have to bring this back to the next meeting as well. So that's just for your, not pressuring you either way, I'm just letting you know that's the procedure. So I would like someone to make the first motion, which is that we do all 3 in one. We can have a discussion about that, and then if that passes, then we just debate the actual motion. And so there has to be 2 votes on this because of that. Can I get someone to make the motion, please? Trustee Bond.
So I'm doing the first one.
Yes.
I move that the board approve 3 readings of Bylaw 5, board meeting procedures. That's it.
Okay. Seconded by Trustee Reed. All right, did you want to speak to that?
I'm good.
Any discussion, trustees? Sorry, sorry. All right, Trustee Westerby.
My only concern with approving 3 readings today, although we have had opportunity for public feedback, is sometimes people need a little bit of time to process it, so I'm wondering if maybe just considering our partners and the public, although this is about the board, still want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to provide us feedback on this bylaw change. So I'm just wondering if approving all 3 readings is the wisest thing right now, but I'm open to other remarks from other members.
Does anybody else wish to speak to this motion about approving all 3 readings in one day? Trustee Moss.
Well, I have no problem. I mean, these are not big fundamental changes of any consequence. I just have to say that I put a notice of motion forward and poof, it appeared on the bylaw just like magic. If only I could get all my motions passed that easily, it would be fantastic. All that to say, I don't believe that any of these are of any real consequence that are controversial or anything like that, if that eases your mind at all.
Trustee Spanky.
Thank you, Chair. Hearing and reflecting on my colleagues' comments, I would suggest that this was adopted in February of 2022. We actually did amend it in February of 2023. If we amend it again today, I think it reflects a willingness on the part of the board to receive new information, change the way we do business in light of it. And given that this is germane to the manner in which we conduct our business, as the member stated, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't make this change today. And we'll change again as needed based on new information.
I guess I'll speak briefly to this motion. I think that I ordinarily do vote to do things over more than one day when it's something important that I feel like people are going to have a lot of feedback. In my mind, these changes are about a thing that's directly only affects trustees. It's about how to get something on an agenda, and that's procedural just because of when the CVC meetings happen. It allows the CVC, which is the chair, vice chair, superintendent, and secretary treasurer, to actually do our work in a way that makes sense. So that's why that change was made. The other one is just a language cleanup about the conflict of interest, so consolidating it into one spot. And then the only one I guess that might be applied to more people would be the superintendent update, but that's actually an addition to the agenda that gives everyone more information. So in my mind, I don't think this is something that necessarily needs more than 1 day of debate. That's just my 2 cents on that. Right, not seeing any more debate on that, I will say all those in favor that the board approve 3 readings of Bylaw 5 board meeting procedures revised as to date. Thank you, trustees. That's unanimous. So we are going to do all 3 readings tonight. So I need the second motion to be put on the table, please.
I will move that the board, I will move that the board approve first, second, and third readings of Bylaw 5.
Board meeting procedures. So I seconded by Trustee Westerby. Trustee Bondor, do you want to speak to this motion at all?
No.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak to it? Oh, Trustee Moss.
I'll just say one thing and that is when we first made our board meeting procedures a bylaw, I was kind of reluctant to do so, and now we've changed it twice since we did it just over a year ago, and so I don't know, maybe somewhere down the line we might want to consider not making it a bylaw, making it simply a policy so that it's not so cumbersome to change, because it does change, and that's just the nature of the way meetings are run. So just food for thought.
Trustee Westerby.
Yeah, even though I was hesitant to do all 3 readings tonight, I do appreciate the comments from members, and that has alleviated my concerns. I am actually really excited about some of the transparency that we've added, and given that extra bit of time to make sure we have our agenda set. So I'm actually speaking in favor of these changes. And yeah, thanks Trustee Moss for that work.
I would also like to speak to the motion since I don't see anyone else's hand up. I think that this is a good example of individual trustees being able to speak into things and having things put on the agenda based on feedback that we can all work together at crafting an agenda and crafting our bylaws and procedures. I think that this was, I believe it was Trustee Swanky who noted the conflict of interest things not being consistent with policy. So that was noted in the email to the superintendent and to the CVC team basically, and so that has been a note that when we look at this bylaw that would come up. And then when Trustee Moss did her notice of motion, that was another thing that was it made sense to all of us. So when we were doing the bylaw, that got added. So I just want to thank everyone for their feedback, and I think it's a good example of how we can all work together as a board to create better procedures. So thank you. I'm not seeing any more comments, so all those in favor that the board approve first, second, and third readings of Bylaw 5 board meeting procedures as presented. That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Motion carries. Okay. We're on to policy 5.5 policy 181 trustee professional development revised. This is Secretary Treasurer as well.
All right, this is my last one for the evening, I think. You're exhausted. So essentially what we're doing with in terms of requests for this policy tonight is clarifying the carryover provisions and aligning it with election cycles. I think that's kind of the 2 key things. And I'll entertain any questions anybody might have.
Are there any questions before we put the motion on the floor, trustees? All right, can I get someone to make the motion for me, please? Trustee Weston.
I move that the Board of Education approve revised policy 181, trustee professional learning, as attached.
Do I have a second? Trustee Bondar, thank you. Trustee Westerby, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure, yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense. I speak in favor of this change. When we came in after the election, we had an odd, staggered budget, and so that actually just makes sense to line up with the cycles of the election so that it makes sense.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Trustee.
Oh, wasn't me. I would just like to mention that. Sorry, it's been a long week. I would just like to mention that I appreciated the time to ask questions about this during professional development time when we were able to kind of hammer things out, and I just wanted to let the public know that we did kind of have some lengthy discussions about it, and all of my questions have previously been answered, and thank you very much.
Anyone else? I just had one quick comment, which I think I think it's really good to have it in line with other expense policies from other staff members, because like there's always a cap on how much you can hold in your account for all of our other staff, teachers, and their Pro-D accounts, and bins in their accounts as well. And so I think it's just fair that trustees can't save up all their money till their last year and then have like a huge amount of money that to spend wildly in the last just before an election. So I think this is I think this makes a lot of sense. So thank you. All right, seeing no more. Oh no, sorry, Trustee Moss.
Thank you. So I guess my only concern is that there are sometimes situations where there might be some kind of a conference in the U.S. or something that takes a fair bit of travel, and if it's something that is coming and you want to save up your Pro-D for it, then this kind of cuts you off at the 5,000 mark. No, I don't know that a Pro-D would ever cost more than 5,000. But yeah, so I mean it sounds reasonable to me, and so that's really the change. Then it's it's not holding any more than $5,000 in your professional development fund, and we had a couple of years of cheap rounds with COVID and nobody going anywhere, so that was a bit of a savings for all the professional development, I guess. So that's good. Anyways, yeah. Thank you.
All right, trustees, all those in favor that the Board of Education approve revised policy 181, trustee professional learning as attached. That's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we have, we're actually doing very well for time, trustees. Yeah. Thank you very much. Actually, it looked like a huge agenda, but these are, going quickly, so thank you. Not that I'm saying it has to go quickly, to be clear. If there's a fulsome discussion on anything, don't hold back. So 5.6 is policy renovation project, policies to be reaffirmed. We just have one policy to reaffirm tonight, which is item 5.6.1, policy 520, public interest disclosure. Superintendent?
That's correct. So
okay.
Thank you, Chair. So really quickly, and I think people are always concerned about the number of policies that are being repealed or being reaffirmed. We're almost coming towards the end of the policy manual analysis. I'll bring an update either in October or November. We have approximately 5 policies to be reaffirmed, including the one today, and 15 policies that we've gone through the analysis that will be repealed between now and the end of November. So, and again, you can always go on our public website. It's an extensive list of policies that have been reaffirmed, that have been repealed, and thank you to Lisa Champion, who does a great job keeping up the website. So that's the information for your consideration. This was brought up for discussion at a public meeting in June of 27th. There were some questions. The bigger question was around the reporting process. And if you actually look at the act by itself, there is a responsibility for the steward of the organization to do a public report within a certain period. And there was a conversation about when does the board actually see the report. I did some digging around, had some considerations. I also checked with BCPC and some other districts by itself. So, and I think these are the changes that I actually made. I've gone through, and I think if you now look at the fact that the policy hasn't changed, one of the things that we reflected upon as an organization, myself and Assistant Director Rachel Green, was the fact that in the procedure pieces, there will be an opportunity for us to bring a report for the Board of Education to consider prior to bringing and posting the report on the public website. So that's a step, again, to enhance transparency. And that was a question last time that requires some clarity and consideration, so I had to do a bit of research and also connect with BCPC. And from their perspective, it's always good practice, and it's always good for the Board of Education. Obviously, the report's going to look the same, but to be able to consider what's in the report before it becomes public. And so nothing else has changed. I'm presenting the report for your consideration, the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the superintendent before we put the motion on the floor? I had one question. Oh, sorry, Trustee Miles, I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks. So this policy is formerly known as the whistleblower policy. And it seems to have a lot more in it than it did before, a lot more steps. Maybe a little more intimidating for said whistleblower. That's just my concern when it's so long. What we don't want to do is discourage people if they've got something that they need to share. So I guess my question is there a way that we can modify this to shrink it in some way? Superintendent?
Thanks, great question. So this actually template came from the British Columbia Public School Association. It's a collective consideration. Even the reporting procedures, we have a template to report out. There's a level of consistency across all 60 school districts. And I really believe now this act policy strengthens the ability for people to bring their considerations and also make sure that there's no reprisal against that. And I think prior to, the policies were not consistent across all 60 school districts. So this actually is an enhancement. I think, Trustee Muzz, if I'm asking, you're more concerned about the length of the policy, am I correct?
Yes.
This is an extension of the template that BCPC provided, and we've used that and so have other districts too. But the content is the same.
Can I just clarify before we move to Trustee Prose? I've got you. I'll call in 1 second. So this is basically going to be what all the districts have, virtually identical language based on what BCPC recommended. Is that what you're saying?
Some districts have a shorter policy, but most have this template.
Trustee Prose.
Yeah, just for clarification, Form 510A in the pamphlet, it's actually only 2 pages. It's actually quite simple. It's just that the prelude to it is very intense because there's so many angles to cover. But the form itself is actually fairly simple, 510A, 2 pages. That's what they have in here.
Assistant Superintendents. Oh, HR.
Thank you. To add to that as well, BCPC has provided a really great, easy to follow training video that we'll be rolling out to all our staff and leaders as well. So it should walk them through the pieces around the policy and help to give them the really point by point how they can put in disclosure so it's not quite so daunting for them.
I did have, Trustee Swanky. No, I have one question first. I'm just curious, you might not even know the answer, but I'm wondering if anyone in the room can tell me why they changed the name to public interest disclosure. I find it a very strange phrase because it makes it sound like you're disclosing to the public in the public interest when I kept reading the policy. I was like, that's not what this is. It's like telling HR or whatever that this thing's happening. So I don't really understand. I understand we have to call it that because that's what the provincial legislation is, but it's very strange. Does anyone know why that's the phrase?
So I Googled it. According to the BC website, it's reporting wrongdoing as a BC Public Service employee. So it's about being a BC Public Service. That's why the public word is in there. It just says speaking up when things aren't right, supports our public service values and the safety and well-being of citizens and colleagues. That's their explanation.
So it's disclosure in the public interest because people are public servants. This is in the public interest that they disclose things. Okay, it's a strange phrase, but that is neither here nor there. Trustees, if someone wants to make the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to move that the Board of Education reaffirm Policy 520, Public Interest Disclosure, previously 404, Whistleblower Protection.
Seconded by Trustee Wester. I'm sorry. Trustee Swanky, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure, thank you, Chair. I'll speak briefly. I appreciate the opportunity to move it as I had asked several questions at the June meeting, specifically around less the language and more the intention of it and the role of the board in the process. I have greater clarity on that now, so I appreciate the opportunity for this to take some time, have those questions addressed, and then come back to the public. In part, this is a compliance issue. We're obligated to update our practices. And in part, this is good practice on the part of the board to make sure there's clarity. And I'd echo the comments of my colleague. It's a 2-page report that's required to summarize. I appreciate HR having these rollout videos to support the availability of these measures to all staff. And I suppose, as I said in the previous one, if we learn new information or more information, we'll make those changes as they come up.
I'm not seeing any further comments from trustees. Not seeing any. I will ask that the Board of all those in favor that the Board of Education reaffirm Policy 520, Public Interest Disclosure as presented. That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Motion carries. Okay, we're on to 5.7, Policy Renovation Project Policies to be repealed. So, now, there are a bunch. It could be passed as one motion, but just what I would like to do as chair, in the interest of just speed and ease, is to ask if there are any trustees that found one of these troubling that they would like to at least have a debate on, then we could pull that one out and then we could pass all the rest as one motion. So if anyone wants to speak now to saying, actually, this one I really would like a debate before we repeal it, we could do that. And if not, then we'll just do a motion to repeal all of those and then we can debate that as one motion. So I'm just going to ask trustees now if there's any one that someone feels they'd really like to do as a separate motion. Trustee Moss.
Well, I do, but I think what I can do is I can speak to all of them with my concerns that I have about repealing all of these policies. So you can go ahead and do them all at the same time, and I will voice my concerns, which are kind of all-encompassing, so that's fine.
I just want to be very clear before I continue that what you're saying is your concern applies to all. There's not one in particular. You're fine with it being as one.
That's
they
correct.
would be the same. Okay. That being said, if someone would like to make a motion to repeal, just say I move the board repeals and then list all the policies, all of them, all 6 of them. Trustee Bondar.
I move that the Board of Education repeal Policy 432, Unauthorized Personnel, Policy 506, Administering Medications to Students, Policy 507, Student Records, Policy 516, Sharing Information by Child and Youth Care Workers, Policy 526, Allergic Shock Anaphylaxis, and Policy 701, Occupational Health and Safety.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Reed. All right. Trustee Bondar, would you like to speak to your motion?
There was detailed explanation for why each of these is to be repealed. We'll hear from people on their thoughts on that. I feel as though the redundancy of these policies is pretty clear to me. Thank you.
Trustee Miles, I know you had a comment. Would you like to go next?
I will. I actually wrote it down, so bear with me. So board policy is the corporate board's voice. Policy speaks to values and, most importantly, expectations. This word and accountability. This word accountability is tossed around a lot. We've kind of lost the importance of the meaning of the word. So, I pulled it up, and this is what I got. The state of being accountable or answerable, responsibility for the fulfillment of obligations, liability to account for conduct, meet or suffer consequences, to hold a trustee, it said that, to his accountability. So the obligation, also the obligation to bear the consequences for failure to perform as expected. So when board policy is stated to be redundant, it's the board's voice that is being silenced. The accountability is removed. So if a parent has an issue with a policy on administering medications to their students or to student records, they don't have a trustee to come to anymore because now it's an administrative regulation. And so our administrators we hire the administrators to do the job, which they do for us on our behalf, but they are not elected to be the community's voice. When policies are removed, so is a community voice. It is the board that becomes redundant as a result, as does the community voice. So I'm going to give you an example here. So Administrative Procedure 425, administering medications to students. It starts off by saying the district believes that the parent guardian is the primary caregiver to the child. The district believes. So now it's a value statement that's being made by the district. That used to be the board. There's another, and hang on a second.
Trustee Moss,
So-
I just interrupted for 1 second to tell you that your 2 minutes is up, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to finish your thought.
Thank you. So policy 507, student records. This is important. It says here, the superintendent of schools shall be responsible for implementing appropriate procedures for storage, retrieval, and transfer of student records in the school district, consistent with this policy and regulation. All students' records shall be maintained in a manner that ensures the confidentiality of information and the privacy of students and their families, and becomes part of the student's file. That is obviously the staff's job to do, but where is the accountability for this to happen? So if a parent has an issue that they want to bring forward, the board is silent on it. So I am troubled by removing these policies, and I'm just concerned that by condensing our policy book, which of course less words is better, but by silencing this, we are silencing ourselves and making ourselves redundant. Our job to represent the
Trustee
community.
Moss, you've had about 4 minutes now, so I'm just in fairness to all trustees.
Thank you. That's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Trustee Prosy.
Appreciate your comments through the board to Heather. I appreciate your comments on. I understand what your concerns may be, but I think maybe what you're maybe not tracking on this is that
So, Trustee Prosy, I'm totally gonna let you keep talking. I just want to remind all trustees that when you're talking to the room, when you're talking, it's best to address the room rather than the person who just spoke, because it's sort of like you're talking to the whole board.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, it encourages sort of an argument between
I
two
was
trustees.
trying to do. I was trying to do it right. I was trying
I
to
know.
go through the chair.
No, but even just talk about your feelings. You can say,
I have
the
no
previous
feelings.
speaker, or I've heard this. You know what I'm saying?
But
just a reminder. I'm not picking on you at all. I'm just reminding.
So, before I run out of my 2 minutes there, I think I understand what you're saying, but I see that we still have responsibility as trustees because it is an administrative procedure. So we can we will lose nothing of what has been. There's nothing here that we will lose. It will be just that it's a redundant policy because it's already administrative. So it'll be in the administrative pocket. So if some parent says, I have a problem with the medication or whatever, we would work through that as a trustee. We would approach the administrative because that's where it's actually done on the ground level. So I think you might be, it's not that we're losing our values or our job. I think we're just placing it in the right place. And we're still responsible for that. It doesn't take it away from us, but we just address it through the administration. So that's my comment.
Okay, Trustee Prosy, Trustee Westerby.
Oh, Trustee Prosy, I just would like to just ask through the chair to the superintendent if you could please speak to the difference between a policy and administrative regulation and how repealing these policies would affect the fulfillment and obligations of the board.
That's an excellent question. And I think there's one policy that drives all of this is policy 141, role of the school superintendent. Look at number 3, assist the board in the development of policies, develops procedures to make these policies operative, and ensures that all policies of the board are fully and effectively implemented. So by that notion, the responsibility falls on the steward of the position to implement all the policies and all the procedures in the organization.
Trustee Smith.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the comments and the concern regarding repeal of the 7 policies before us. I think the first thing I'd highlight is that in each case there's legislation, there's legal obligation, there's ministerial order that inform the implementation of those. To what I think is a very valid point about the values of the board that inform these policies, I want to be mindful of the fact that policy 110 speaks very clearly to all work of the district being informed by specific values. That is approved by the board. It's it is informed by the values of the community and the consultation that was conducted. And so that is explicit. And bylaw 4 outlines the means by which an operational decision of the district could be appealed where there's questions about whether or not those values have been upheld. So I in no way see this as the board failing to uphold its obligation. Rather, I look at it as we're cleaning up the manner in which business is going to be done. We're ensuring clarity and consistency in the application of those values because we're not constantly re-articulating them through new policies. And we're also making sure that we are not constantly updating policy every time a regulation, piece of legislation, or legal obligation changes. So in each case, I think these are very important in terms of their application to the district, but there's no value actually offered by them being articulated in policy.
I'm going to speak to this motion as well. I think when I look at the list that's on the list tonight, it seems all very operational to me. It actually seems slightly odd that some of them were policies in the first place, because it's administering medications to students is very clearly something that happens at the school level. It's not something that trustees would have any knowledge of. So for that reason, I think all of them are good ones to repeal. And also, I think that trustees have raised concerns at previous meetings about now there's administrative regulations. Where do parents even find that? And we did address that by putting that on the same page that all the board policies are on. So I feel like that fulfills the transparency factor. People can find, if they don't see it in policy, they can go and find the admin regulation. And as a previous speaker noted, there is an appeals process in the district. So if people are upset with a decision at a school level, they can go to the superintendent, and then ultimately they can go to the board for appeal if a decision is unfair. So I think the board still has quite a lot of discretion, even with things that are no longer under specific policies. And like as also articulated, we do have the vision and values of the district that the board does set. So I'm very comfortable repealing this set of policies. I think having a shorter, more concise policy manual is better and actually more transparent in a way, because people can find stuff rather than weeding through miles and miles worth of links to things that aren't really necessary. I'm just going to ask if anyone who hasn't spoken wants to speak first. Oh, Trustee Westerby.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to also, just for the public record and so the public knows, administrative procedure is also able to be updated on the fly. So it's much quicker to respond to the needs of the community rather than having to wait to come to the board table and talk about it. It actually takes some time. So especially things like administering medicines, that can be updated quicker, which means that students can get what they need faster. And it's reflective of our values, which also as part of what we develop as a board, we develop our values and our district things. So I also just want to let everyone know that I did work out with the superintendent some things on the administrative procedure about student records, and that's been reflected. So just want to say thanks to the superintendent for that work. It's more, to me, it's more transparent, more easy to understand from a layman like myself. So thank you.
Okay, not seeing, oh, Trustee Moss.
So one more comment. I mean, I'm not gonna go to town on this, but I'm giving a caution to all of you. We recently had, was it last year or the year before, a parent who had an issue with medication, and the provincial government changed something, and she came to the board, and the board and staff, we all worked together, and we managed to help her get her needs met at the particular school. And it took some doing, but it took all of us. So basically what will happen now is the board is cut out of that kind of work because we had a policy on it. Now we don't have a policy on it. So that's fine. I'm just saying that's, you know, if it's in legislation and if it's in the school act, and then, well, I guess we won't need a board so much anymore to represent the community if everything's all tidied up in legislation and admin regs. So I have one more comment. And that is, I'm not comfortable with value statements being made in admin regulations, and I'm sure it was an oversight that somebody was just feeling especially passionate about it. But admin procedure 425, when it says the district believes that parent guardian is the primary caregiver to their child, blah 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 blah. So that is a value statement, and I'm not sure that belongs in an admin regulation. So that's all. Thank you.
Superintendent, just before it looks like no one else wants to speak, so just before we move to the vote, I just want to clarify with you, because I'm having a hard time remembering. My memory is the parent who came to the board with the medication issues. What we ended up doing as a board was writing a letter to the minister, and I'm not sure if that had anything to do with policy. Do you remember?
I do, and there was a update this year from the DA memo that I sent to all members of the Board of Education. This was a provincial consideration around administering a medication to kids across all school districts. There was a report in the Langley newspaper. We had a consideration here too. We actually generally would work with the nursing supports to try and get that. We wrote the letter to the minister. We got a response back. It was a provincial issue.
Yeah, I guess my clarification was there was nothing about having the policy that made the board less or more able to speak to that, right? All right, so all those in favor that the board repeal policy 432, unauthorized personnel, policy 506, administering medication to students, policy 507, student records, policy 516, sharing information by child and youth care workers, policy 526, allergic shock anaphylaxis, and policy 701, occupational health and safety. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, trustees. All right, the meeting summaries are in the package, and now it is item 7, public participation, comments or questions concerning the agenda. Anybody who would like to come to the mic is free to do so. Same rules as always. Seeing no one, this meeting is adjourned. Next board meeting is October 10th. See you then.